Now, we investigated in the field with the cooperatives, the growers, and the consultants what was going on and what people knew about GTDs. What diseases are we talking about? We're talking about ESCA, the black dead arm, Botryopsphera dieback, and eutepiosis or Eutepia dieback. We focused onto these three diseases in particular. As a whole, these was the level of knowledge on the part of European growers. They're pretty good on the average. Almost everyone is aware of grapevine trunk diseases. They know where they come from, what are the pathogens, and they know how to differentiate all the different diseases. But then we'll also see other problems where people tend to mix up the different diseases and know only certain diseases or have no knowledge of the diseases. But on average, everywhere, people tend to know pretty well what these diseases are about. Recognizing symptoms, well, there's a good knowledge of symptoms. We interviewed with these people with photos, and in most cases they were capable of differentiating ESCA and black dead arm. Sometimes it can be challenging, but generally the symptoms are clearly identified. Whether it is for GTDs or flavescens doré, wine growers are not standing idle, and there are practices that are well known. Some are validated from a scientific standpoint, and practices that are truly innovations that are not validated, and we should be cautious about them because from a scientific perspective they have not been demonstrated yet and not well studied even. So there are several practices implemented in the vineyards. There are practices that will tend to replace the dead vines to repair or restore the infected vines, prophylactic measures, the practices to protect pruning wounds, and all the art practices, which we've termed typical here. Now, uprooting and replanting, everybody does this, it's well known everywhere. So I will not expand on this. There might be some problems because it's not always easy to replant with the old vines. And the new plants have a hard time growing. So there might be cases where the missing vines are not replaced. The pruning debris and the dead vines, however, must be handled cautiously as they are a source of inoculum for the pathogens. Now, reforming and repairing the vines. This is done in all the regions of the project. Basically, the trunk is reformed using a new sucker. This is an innovative practice because not many growers do the same. In the other regions, other than Istria, everybody seems to be doing this. But then the methodologies may differ. Some people do this when the vine is really dying. Others do so when the first symptoms appear on the leaves. And others still will do it anyway on sensitive varieties. And they do so recovering a bud and a bud on the foot, on the stalk. But it's very important that the new cane develops from a non-necrotic part of the trunk. And It's effective in fighting Eutypia as a practice, but it's only partially effective when it comes to Esca and dead black arm. And it's particularly important to pay attention to the necrosis because if you don't grow the new cane from a healthy part of the trunk, the disease will redevelop quickly. Overgrafting. Overgrafting is another way to reform the vine while preserving the roots. Basically, you are taking a new scion, a healthy scion that you will graft onto the existing wood, the existing trunk. You have to avoid the necrosis pretty well to be successful. There are some people who do this in France and very few in Spain, but not many others elsewhere because it's a very technical practice. Whether it is a new grafting or an over grafting, when it's well done, it does show good results. It does not work on all varieties. And it's used generally for varieties that do not develop suckers. It has to be done on young vines because if they're older, over 25 years of life, the success rate is going to be low. Then we have curettage or a trunk cleaning. This is a technique that consists in eliminating the dead part of the wood from the trunk, and you need to identify where the necrosis is, then you cut it off, and then you you scrap that and take the good parts of the trunk to reuse them. For eutypiosis, this is ineffective. So all the sponges and dead parts of the vine needed to be eliminated. You need to be attentive not to cut too low, otherwise it's going to be a problem for the vine to resume its activity. It's a very traumatic technique. Some tests are underway, but currently we have no scientific information available yet, nor do we know the real effectiveness of this practice. There is a reasonable number of growers in France and Italy particularly that use this technique. It could take between 2 and 5 minutes per vine. But the growers say that this is very successful. Those who use it are pretty happy with the results. And the symptoms expressed tend to be minimized after this treatment. And it's done on, and if you do this on apoplectic forms, it's not at all effective. It needs to be relatively preventative. You have to take action as soon as you start seeing the first symptoms. These are prophylactic measures. It all boils down to reducing the inoculum and avoiding infection. The dead vines and the debris must be cut and destroyed. There are growers who will just cut symptomatic shoots as soon as they start seeing the first symptoms on the leaves. But we don't know actually what the effect is on the expression of the systems once you take the symptomatic shoots away. The dead vines, the leaves, the pruning debris is a source of pathogens, so it's better not to leave them around in the vineyard. And the best thing would be to destroy them. It's important not to keep the older trunks, to reuse them because they are necrotic, and so the best option is to carry them away from the plot. Another prophylactic measure consists in choosing the pruning period accurately. Depending on the region, either people prune early or late, and that really depends on the regions, as you can see on the map. You have late pruning in green and early pruning in blue, and so you see the differences. But it's hard to implement because you have labor limits in an estate, and the period for pruning is pretty short, so it's hard to time your pruning correctly. It's better to prune by dry weather than when it's damp. Then you have all forms and all pruning techniques that are respectful of the sap flow. We have no idea of what the effect is going to be, however, on grapevine trunk diseases. These are practices carried out in many European regions, in the southwest of France, Alsace, Germany, Italy, and Croatia. There are many growers who try to improve their pruning techniques, not to disturb, not to prevent the sap flow. And that causes all the wounds to concentrate on the top of the vine, and you have more wounds on annual wood than on perennial wood. Then you have different protection pruning wound techniques. So you have physical protections with wax, which is generally applied to form a physical barrier against pathogens, so that the pathogens can't pass through the pruning wounds. The mastic must be applied pretty early, soon after the pruning. It's not commonly used, but anywhere we found growers in every region using this particular approach. Then the wounds can be protected using a biological protection agent, biocontrol agent. This is easier to do. You spray the agent, and you can do that using a typical sprayer or a water sprayer. This improves the quality and seals off the pruning wounds, keeping the pathogens at bay. This is used generally preventively. It can be sprayed or painted on top, and it has an unclear efficacy, although because we don't know yet, but it looks like it could be very promising. And the earlier you apply the biocontrol agent, the better for the wound. So you have to pay attention to the temperatures, because it's live microorganisms, and so you have to apply it at a temperature of 4 to 10 degrees C, avoiding rain after application. The time being, the growers told us that they haven't really understood whether it works well, and it's too early to see if trichoderma is actually effective. It is true that we still need many demonstrations. Now, after this, we've listed all the atypical practices, all the odd practices that have not received yet any validation, any scientific validation. We do not recommend them. We will just describe them so that you know what's in use and what the growers are attempting to do to counter damages connected with GTDs. Injections, H2O2 injections. that are generally made in some regions. So there are 5 growers out of 219 interviewed that use this practice in different ways. There are people injecting H2O2 as soon as they start seeing symptoms on the leaves, and others that do so after pruning. There's no golden standard because actually we know nothing about the effect of H2O2 on grapevine trunk diseases. The people who do this drill holes in the trunk where they inject the H2O2. This is done in several spots on the trunk. We don't know what the doses are, what proportion of H2O2, and if one injection is enough or it takes several injections. But what they have noticed is that treated plants do not express the symptoms anymore. There might be losses of products the year after or years after. H2O2 is not authorized for viticulture in viticulture for grapevine trunk diseases. Back to trichoderma, there's another technique that uses trichoderma. It consists in inserting trichoderma inoculated splinters of wood in the trunk of the vine. So you have to drill holes to place these splinters in them, these bars, these sticks in them. And it's more of a preventative measure, and it's something that growers do during the vegetative period. One grower did so on vineyards that had already developed ESCA symptoms. He's been doing this for 1 year, so we know nothing about whether there will be effects or not, and we have no scientific validation for this practice. Then there are copper nanoparticles injections. Just like with trichoderma, there's one case in Galicia, one grower. This is a preventative or treatment approach on plants that already have signs of the ESCA. There's an injection of 2 injections of aqueous solutions of copper nanoparticles with elicitors being injected, and the 2 injections happen at bud burst and at veraison. These tests have been carried out for 1 year now and have no results as for the effects on grapevine trunk diseases. Another practice consists in soaking the grafted plants before planting them in the vineyard in a fungicide solution. They're left soaking for approximately 15 minutes. People applying it say the results are good. And for the time being, these products, fungicide products, are not approved for GTDs, but scientific trial is in progress. So we will receive more information in the years to come. All of this information that I have illustrated is available at our website in this space that is a reservoir of information that contains scientific and practical information as that presented by Vincenzo. For these practices, we have individual fact sheets to provide the main details about how they're applied and what results they can provide. This is all available on winenetwork-data.eu or on the Wine Network website. Thank you.